David Gaider, former BioWare lead writer on Dragon Age, responded to someone on Bluesky saying, "There seems to be more preference for Mass Effect than Dragon Age." Quoting David Gaider, "While I was at BioWare, EA always preferred Mass Effect. Straight up, their marketing team liked it more. It was modern, it had action, they never quite knew what to do with Dragon Age. And whether Dragon Age outperformed Mass Effect got the excuses. If you ask me, it was always just shy of the axe since Dragon Age Origins." This makes a lot of sense. If you've kept an eye on Mass Effect and Dragon Age, it seems that Mass Effect is just given so much more. But why is it given so much more? David Gaider said that they liked it because it was more modern and had action. But is that the whole story? Mass Effect is so much more popular of a series, not in just terms of sales because Dragon Age Inquisition is BioWare's best-selling title, but in terms of how it perceived and how culturally impactful it is, even to this day. Mass Effect is more culturally impactful than Dragon Age. Mass Effect's influence on RPGs and gaming can still be felt even today. From how every RPG after it became a lot more cinematic, to how every RPG got a voiced protagonist. Even Obsidian has made a Mass Effect-like game with Alpha Protocol. The most obvious one, which just shows how influential Mass Effect was, is the dialogue wheel, which is there to indicate to the player that they want to think this is a Mass Effect-like game. It has wormed its way into many games both big and small, of Orcs and Men, Deus Ex Human Revolution Mankind Divided, Alpha Protocol, and even today with Assassin's Creed Shadows, which is particularly odd because the prior RPG Assassin's Creed games used a list format. And the biggest example on how Mass Effect influenced an RPG so heavily is with Fallout 4. Emil Pagliarulo loves Mass Effect, and this is clear with his video.
And you notice all of these dialogue systems are very similar, right? And we decided we were going to try to do something different. Oh, and of course we looked at other games as well. Games that are known for great storytelling and great interactions with characters, right? Mass Effect games, right? Telltale's games, all wonderful. And we knew that we needed to have voice protagonists. That was a big step for us. So we got Courtney and Brian, two amazing actors we worked very closely with. And I've lost track, but Fallout 4 has something like 120,000 lines of spoken dialogue, and I think 40 or 50% of that is actually the player character dialogue. And so they had a lot of work over a lot of months. And we knew that was part of it, because we realized that when you're trying to relay emotion, the story that we wanted to tell in Fallout, which is, ultimately the story of you looking for your child, we knew that we needed two actors who could relay that sort of emotion, and we needed a voice protagonist to do that. It was a very controversial choice within the studio. It was the first time we had ever done that. And there's something to be said for the silent protagonist, right? So you can have the voice in your head. But we knew that in order to tell the story the way we wanted to, we were going to have to voice them.
He believes that Fallout 4 needed a voice protagonist and needed a similar dialogue system to be able to tell the emotional story they wanted to tell. A story about a parent looking for a child, and so he looked to other games to see how they told their stories. Mass Effect is one of them. Now this isn't about if Emil did the right thing. I'm just demonstrating how Mass Effect influenced the gaming industry. It resonated with Emil enough for him to want to make something similar, to change a series that was about player agency above all and make it into a story that restricts the player's agency in favor of narrative. Side note, I do have to say that the whole talk is about how stories in games can be written like movies or shows, and he is sharing his experience with writing in games. It wasn't about how Fallout 4 was made. It doesn't change my point because it is showing how Mass Effect influenced the gaming industry, just needed to clarify that. Though the fact that he expresses his disappointment that he can't write a game like a movie or a TV show does demonstrate that he wants to make games like that, at least at the time this talk was made. Which is why I feel Emil would work better at BioWare than Bethesda, because Bethesda games are system driven than narrative driven. Anyways, side note over. Even Dragon Age has succumbed to Mass Effect's influence, including voice protagonists, the dialogue wheel, to have the impossible mission in Veilguard. Mass Effect has a huge impact on games, even to this day. Dragon Age's cultural impact is there, but not nearly to the extent of Mass Effect. Not even close. How I see it, Dragon Age has two games that are the most similar to it, and it isn't even by much. Not at all. The most similar is Cyberpunk 2077, and that is only because it has, in quotation marks, Origins. Why I say in quotation marks is because that is where the influence ends. The game is not structured like Dragon Age Origins, it is an open world, it doesn't have companions, it has a voiced protagonist, and its origins is not similar enough to what Dragon Age Origins did. Dragon Age Origins has an hour-long prologue, while Cyberpunk takes about 20 minutes to finish, and it doesn't even have the same double meaning as Dragon Age Origins has. Characters from the prologues do come back, but not in the same way as returning to the alienage as a city elf. Seeing your home in yet another crisis, people you knew are now enslaved. There is more context, more drama that is at play. It is far fairer to call Cyberpunk's influence more on the Witcher series and BioWare in general. The second game is Baldur's Gate 3. With the people going, but it definitely is influenced by Dragon Age Origins. And I have to ask, how? How is Baldur's Gate 3 influenced by Dragon Age Origins? The only similarities are 4 things. It has cinematics, which yeah, Origins had cinematics as well, but Dragon Age Origins also had them because of KOTOR. KOTOR impacted games similarly to Mass Effect as well. Like Mass Effect, it influenced Dragon Age. So I don't think you can say that Baldur's Gate 3 is influenced by Dragon Age, because ultimately it was impacted by KOTOR. And that team went on to make Mass Effect. Its impact does not come from itself, but from another game. Now, the companions can be attributed to Dragon Age, but companions in RPGs have just been a thing since RPGs. Now, you can say that Baldur's Gate 3's companions are influenced by Dragon Age Origins' style of companions, and the companions themselves, like Shadowheart and Morrigan, but that is just a surface level understanding. Morrigan and Shadowheart are 2 very different companions. The only similarity they have is that they both look somewhat goth and are involved with the main story, but even then it's so surface level. Morrigan opens up a path to save the player character from dying, while Shadowheart is a delivery girl of the main plot item. She isn't even relevant to the main story as Morrigan is. After Shadowheart makes the delivery, she no longer is needed. Not that she has a purpose whatsoever, but the role she plays is different from the role Morrigan plays. They serve very different roles. They are also very different people. Morrigan is, frankly, a bitch, but that is the point. She is very rough around the edges and is always working to her own ends. What Morrigan approves of is telling of what she values. She values prioritizing the self above all others. In a D&D alignment chart, she is a neutral evil character. She won't actively do harm, but she will betray or use others to her own ends if it furthers her own power or goals. Shadowheart is a good person deep down. Her story is about abuse and manipulation, and what direction she can fall into. Her personality is built off of that. She is someone who didn't start out the same way Morrigan did. She had very kind and caring parents who valued her. She was kidnapped and brainwashed to be an eviler person. But despite that, her upbringing still shines through. She is a person who cares. Morrigan's upbringing is complicated, and it would require me to derail the video, but the basic gist is that Morrigan didn't have the greatest upbringing. I don't think it was abusive, but it was clear that Flemeth taught her what she felt she needed to have in order to survive, to look out for oneself and use others if needed. Shadowheart does not have that at all. She may be skeptical and secretive due to the circumstances of her upbringing, but she is a kind person deep down. She approves of the player character helping the tieflings, while Morrigan has no such care. If placed in a similar position, Morrigan would have sided with the Absolute because they bring promise of power. The same is true with every companion. And the companion story is progressed very differently as well. Dragon Age's companions are progressed linearly. If you do not have enough approval for a companion, you just can't finish their quest. You will go past Goldana's house multiple times in Darrah, yet you can never enter there. You can meet Dwayne with Sten, and he will never mention Sten's sword until the appropriate moment of approval is gained, and the quest is followed as is. It's building up a story. While in Baldur's Gate 3 you can progress all companion stories non-linearly. You can barely talk to the companions, yet finish all their quests without ever speaking to them. Baldur's Gate 3 is far more non-linear in every department that Dragon Age never was or intended to be. In Dragon Age Origins, you can choose what order to do the main quest in, but you can never choose to skip any of them. While Baldur's Gate 3, you can just skip everything. Additionally, companions are playable. That changes a lot. The game has to then consider what it's like playing as the companions, rather than just a custom character. The third similarity is that they're both fantasy games, but that is so surface level that it's hard to see how anyone can think this makes them related. One is an original IP that is deliberately made to be different from D&D. David Gaider said this on a livestream for their, at the time, new game, Stray Gods. The transcript should appear now, and the link for the transcript is in the description. And the other is just D&D with no focus on world building. The last is that Baldur's Gate 3 has, in quotation marks, origins. It is similar in name only. You don't have an hour-long prologue that sets up the world, characters, and story and themes. The only double meaning you have is seeing characters from the origin backgrounds, but that is muted because you don't have any context behind them. Seeing Karlach's old friend is cool, but means nothing because the player couldn't develop a relationship with them prior to meeting them. There wasn't anything as meaningful as seeing Shani, Gorham, or Lesky. The things that made Origins special aren't in Baldur's Gate 3. You don't get to customize a character with a background. You don't get to have an hour-long prologue, or get to have that double meaning. Nor do you get to have that sense your character belongs to the world. Baldur's Gate 3 isn't influenced by Dragon Age or Origins. It's just too different for that to be the case. Baldur's Gate 3 is influenced by BioWare broadly. And in the ways it is influenced is by BioWare's cinematic style and not their ways of making games. From how they make RPGs to what they prioritize as important, it is very surface level. Baldur's Gate 3 is more of a Larian game than a Dragon Age game, or a BioWare game. Baldur's Gate 3's true inspiration lie with Ultima 7, as Sven says in this interview. Dragon Age has had so little impact on the gaming industry. No games have earnestly tried to be like it, from Dragon Age Origins to Dragon Age Veilguard. Now, Dragon Age Veilguard is understandable, since it's released recently at the time of making this video, and its influences are just, again, Mass Effect. Now, that doesn't mean it's bad. There are plenty of good games that haven't had that much cultural impact, but are good games nonetheless. The Grand Theft Auto and Red Dead Redemption series are great games, yet they have zero impact on gaming industry. No games have tried to be like them. Some take elements here and there, but not to the same degree that Mass Effect has influenced RPGs. Yet that doesn't mean it is bad. Same with Breath of the Wild. Great games, yet very few games have tried to be like it. The only one I can name is Eternal Strands, a 2025 game, one game since Breath of the Wild's launch in 2017. The next question I have to ask is, why? Why is Mass Effect so much more culturally impactful and popular than Dragon Age? It can't be because Dragon Age is bad and Mass Effect's good, there's more to it. Momentum builds. Mass Effect may not be as popular as it once was, but it was hugely popular at the time, and that kind of popularity builds. And this is where I struggle a lot in the video finding out the reasons why Mass Effect is more popular and culturally impactful. It's not an easy question to find out, as I will discuss why it is difficult when I get to it. So to help me at least get to the correct direction, I asked my community for their thoughts on the topic. So thank you for everyone who responded to the post. I appreciate your contributions to this video and the channel. Link to the community post in the description. So let's get to it. The reasons are comprised of what my community said and my own thoughts about it. It's sci-fi, it's novel, it's more marketable. Mass Effect being sci-fi was one of the reasons I dismissed. I did this because I wasn't thinking about the context Mass Effect was in. I was thinking about sci-fi games in the context of today and what it was like when Mass Effect was released. The commenters of the community post helped me realize though that in context Mass Effect being a sci-fi is what made it so popular. If you look at all the games being made before and around Mass Effect, a lot of them are either fantasy games or games set in modern settings. There were very few sci-fi games, the most notable being Halo. Mass Effect was coming into a gaming industry that had very few sci-fi games, and especially sci-fi games like Mass Effect. It felt new and compelling. Mass Effect's brand of space opera sci-fi was very new at the time. Which leads into another reason why Mass Effect is so popular, and that is it was novel. No game was really trying to do what Mass Effect did. Its sci-fi felt very original but familiar. It had the trappings of Star Wars and Star Trek. Sci-fi that made sense on how its setting functioned, with examples like Element Zero, and had the space opera of Star Wars where characters and drama were the focus and the scale of the narrative was galactic, coupled with some amazing music, creative locations, and alien designs. It was the first RPG to put an emphasis of choices and consequences with a voice protagonist. Shepard is iconic to the series, to the point where Andromeda suffered because they weren't there. Shepard and their personality are central to the experience and how they shape and change the world they are a part of. Very few games have a protagonist like Shepard, and very few games put effort to have your choices be imported across games. Every game that has tried, either then BioWare, has failed. Either to keep it going or to make it as meaningful as BioWare does it. CD Projekt Red tried, but they effectively stopped with Witcher 3, where it was so disconnected from the prior games, choices that they just retconned, like the possibility of Toller's death. Kitsy Hudson, in a Gamer Informer interview, said this as much.
Well, the idea of creating a trilogy that preserved your choices, not just throughout one game, but across the entire trilogy, was actually in the very original concept for Mass Effect and what the trilogy was about. And that's one of the things that I'm most proud of, actually, is that back in 2005, we announced Mass Effect. And we talked about what it was, and we talked about that it was a trilogy, and that there would be this concept of being able to move your save game across. Now, it's very important to also mention that we build these games so that people can enter them at any point, and that it's a great starting experience, and that's how Mass Effect 3 is designed. In fact, better than ever, it's a great place to start in the Mass Effect universe. But for people who have played with us all along, the idea that you create a character and then these choices and these relationships actually span huge game titles, that's something that's never been done before, and I would argue might never be done again. It's very hard, very expensive, very complicated. And even the idea of saying that you're going to do a trilogy, you have to plan that you're going to do that, but to be able to do that and know that it's going to have to span recessions, it's going to have to span changes in the industry and the way people consume games, the way people play them. It's been a huge victory for us just to do 3 games, let alone being able to also do this save game feature that we do.
It was a huge commitment, but it clearly had so many benefits. Mass Effect doing this makes it unique among all games, and is only rivaled by Dragon Age. Mass Effect was pushing boundaries on what sci-fi and an RPG could be. A game that could have a sense that Star Trek had, but the narrative scope and characters of Star Wars. That it could have a voice protagonist in an RPG and make choices feel impactful, and doing so in a setting that felt creative, new, and familiar. From the locations, music, and to the aliens we interact with. Dragon Age, by comparison, is much, much safer looking. It's a celebration of CRPGs. It's ultimately a retread of what was before, not pushing what an RPG could be. It's the best the genre has to offer, but it doesn't do anything new and novel. Its gameplay harkens back to the well-walked grounds of real-time with pause gameplay of Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, and its Infinity Engine siblings, and its setting looks very generic. It has elves, dwarves, and humans in a medieval setting. Its original race is literally just tall humans but grey, and its art style is generic fantasy. Now, Dragon Age isn't generic in its setting or lore as it might seem. It's very deep and does things with those common fantasy ideas that hasn't been done before or since. But on the surface, it looks very safe and plain when compared to Mass Effect. It is a fantasy game with no real unique identity, coming into a space where fantasy games were a dime a dozen and having gameplay that was not mainstream. Which leads me to the next reason, which is Mass Effect is more marketable. Far, far more marketable than Dragon Age ever could be. As David Gaider pointed out, and even another BioWare developer, Darrah, said, the N7 logo is just some iconic imagery. The simple and clean design, the contrasting colors of red, black, and white. It's simple and immediately recognizable, and unique to Mass Effect. Dragon Age doesn't have that. The closest it has is the Grey Wardens, but their logo is far more complicated and it's, let's be honest, generic. A griffin symbol is something that is just stock fantasy and doesn't look like it belongs anywhere. The N7 logo looks like it was specific to a certain property, that it belongs to something, and that extends it to the look of Mass Effect. Mass Effect looks like something. It has an identity and art style that is recognizably its own. Dragon Age is generic. Is that a bad thing? No. And yes. No, as generic fantasy still looks cool. Like, come on, who doesn't like some stereotypical fantasy of stuff like a knight in shining armor fighting against orcs? That is just some really cool stuff. And yes, because it can be distinguished from other fantasy media. If you take a sea of sci-fi games and line them up together, Mass Effect will stand out. But if you do that with Dragon Age Origins, then it won't. It will get lost in the mire of browns. Again, not bad. In terms of having a lasting impact, it not looking like something has an effect. A huge reason Mass Effect is so popular and culturally impactful and relevant is because it looks like something. And when Dragon Age tried to look like something, people hated it for it, only furthering its cultural relevance into the dustbin of gaming. And Mass Effect being an action game makes it much more accessible to a wider audience. More people understanding the verbs of shooting than they do tactics, because more games, and more importantly popular games, have action gameplay than tactical gameplay. that it is transference of gameplay knowledge that is a mainstream audience can get. But also, it is just easier to understand. You point a gun and shoot. Whereas with a tactical game, you have to put a lot of effort into understanding the systems and gameplay to really get something out of it. Understanding all the abilities and how to best use them in combination with your party, all the different weaknesses and resistances you and an enemy has, and not only that, but since it has so much more systems, it is harder to understand in general. You can do it, but when compared to the simplicity of Mass Effect, there's no wonder why it's easy to get into. To be fair to Dragon Age Origins, it is probably the most accessible CRPG out there. I, a person whose Pillars of Eternity gameplay comprises of me looking at my abilities going, can understand what the Dragon Age Origins abilities do and what they are for. But it being the most accessible isn't enough for many people. And the next reason why Mass Effect is more popular is because EA is better at marketing action gameplay than tactical games. They have an experience with Battlefield and FIFA, which can transfer over to Mass Effect. Let's be honest, Dragon Age Origins trailers are really cool, but inaccurate. You don't fight in these cool action set pieces against hordes of zombie orcs. You do fight, and sometimes in big groups, but it's presented less as an epic battle, and more like a series of tactical choices. The most epic battle is the Battle of Ostagar and Denerim, but that is it. So when people see trailers like that, they are disconnected. The game isn't like that. Bit of false marketing. You spend an hour running around a prologue area and talking to people. There is more talking than fighting. Some have more and less, but the basic feeling is that if you came into Dragon Age Origins expecting an epic battle fantasy with fighting, you will be disappointed. But the Mass Effect trailers, they are accurate. They describe the game perfectly. A strong character going out fighting aliens, saving lives, and making hard choices. It's true to what the game actually is. Obviously, it's more than that, but it is more accurate than Dragon Age. Mass Effect's marketing fits it so much better than Dragon Age's. This means that Dragon Age was never going to get its intended audience on board because they would question if this is a tactical RPG where conversations rule the day, and not just a generic fantasy action hero game with knights in shining armor fighting orcs. Now, that isn't bad to like those kind of games, it's fine to like them. What is bad is that it is inaccurate and stifles reach and popularity. It also helps that Mass Effect looks like something. While I did mention it before, it is crucial in marketing that your game looks like something. Mass Effect has a distinct art style and iconography. The N7 logo is just some iconic symbol, and a location such as the Citadel and ships like the Normandy is just free marketing. Dragon Age doesn't have that. What makes Dragon Age different from other fantasy games? A lot, but looking at the surface level, it just doesn't really feel like there's any difference. It's portrayed as any other generic fantasy game. Again, nothing wrong with liking generic fantasy in both art style or otherwise. The issue is that it doesn't look like anything. And when marketing anything, it helps that it looks like something. And an important thing to note is that Mass Effect was just liked by EA more, as according to David Gaider. They just preferred it way more, for the reasons I listed. And as such, when EA changed leadership, they just ended up liking it more. That bit of info can be found on Mark Darrah's video, link in the description. And so with Mass Effect's popularity meant it could have impacted games more. Popular games, whether they are good or bad, tend to influence the games around them. The only reasons why some games can't really influence is because what they are doing can't be replicated, like with GTA. Mass Effect though can be replicated without costing an arm and a leg to produce, or having to spend years trying to make it. The dialogue wheel is just a different dialogue interface, so that isn't hard to replicate. Companions were always a thing, it just needs to be done in the style of Mass Effect, which provides an easy template to follow. Companions represent some aspect of the world, companions have the themes of games incorporated into them, companions have a rich and deep backstory, and companions are important or have reason to get involved with the main plot. Having a voice protagonist was now seen as pushing boundaries for RPGs. It was new and novel. Side point, many people who dislike voice protagonists don't dislike them on principle, but dislike them because they want more voice options for their character, in that it is a recognition that it is good, but needs to get better. And being associated with Mass Effect is good as well now. Games being more cinematic was also seen as pushing boundaries, especially in RPGs. All of this means that Mass Effect set a new standard for what an RPG could be, and if a studio wants to get the attention of RPG players, they have to follow the standard that Mass Effect set. Having a voice protagonist was seen as the next step in RPG evolution, and likewise cinematics. And, fortunately or unfortunately for some people, Mass Effect was easy enough to replicate. It also helps those studios themselves just liked Mass Effect. Now, I do need to address why I'm focusing so much on Dragon Age Origins, so my next point can be easier to understand. Mass Effect 1 caused so many people to take inspiration from it, to change what their preference in RPGs was, and for new players, it set their expectations for what RPGs are as Mass Effect. Dragon Age Origins didn't do that. It was a deliberate retread of old CRPGs, and its cinematic nature was influenced by Knights of the Old Republic, and Mass Effect 1 came out from the eyes of the audience. Dragon Age Origins was already taking cues from Mass Effect. Dragon Age Origins, being a retread, meant that it couldn't capture audiences tired of older RPGs or new audiences because it was harkening back to older modes of play. Newer audiences weren't familiar with real-time with pause or heavy dialogue games. The ones who liked the style of Dragon Age Origins were already on board, but Mass Effect captured old and new audiences, people whose first RPG was Mass Effect. I talk about Dragon Age Origins and not the other games because Dragon Age Origins was when the franchise could solidify itself and influence others, but it didn't, because it wasn't bold, new, or daring. That's not bad. It's okay to have games that are retreading old ground, but it doesn't help having staying power or influencing other games, as I have explained before. Dragon Age Origins haven't influenced games like Mass Effect, and its influence is just influence from Mass Effect. It could have never have so much impact because it was never popular, and even if it was popular, it isn't that easy to replicate. So when the next Dragon Age games started to be more like Mass Effect, it was already a foregone conclusion that Mass Effect already won that cultural victory. So that is why I say Mass Effect is more popular and culturally impactful than Dragon Age. At least what I think. I admit I don't have the full picture, only what I can tell from observing the two series' impact on gaming, what my audience told me, and what the developers themselves have said. I hope this video gave you some understanding on this topic. If you like the video, perhaps consider liking it. If you don't, there is a button for that. If you really like the video, perhaps consider subscribing. Comment down below what you think about Mass Effect's cultural impact. I've always read and respond to comments. I enjoy seeing what you guys have to say, and have a good day. I am a huge fan of Dragon Age, my favorite franchise out of BioWare's catalog, and I'm sad that it didn't end up inspiring other games like Mass Effect did. Dragon Age's world building is still top tier, and no other fantasy game has really delved into the logic and mechanics of how a fantasy series would work. And when any fantasy series kind of does that, it's always done in this very weird way. I'm not sure how it would describe it, but it's very weird. And yeah, I hope you have a good day.